1. A number of years back, I played an MMO. It was there that I made a friend, Kevin. Kevin is a Cuban-American from Florida, relevant later, and is potentially the single dumbest individual I have ever met. Despite this fact, no person can say he wasn't good-natured. Speaking of nature, perhaps the best way I can describe Kevin is he is one of nature's most interesting developments. It amazes me to this day that he functions in society. Kevin often played this MMO with his childhood best friend, whom I was also friends with. For the purposes of this story, we'll call him James. One day I'm told by Kevin that he just bought a new motorbike. He shows me some pictures and is really ecstatic with it. I'm aware at the time he had just been fired from his job at Dunkin' Donuts for screaming obscenities at a rude customer through the drive-thru window, and then proceeding to try and climb through said window to get at them, needing to be restrained by the manager. I'm confused as to how Kevin has afforded such a bike, because even second-hand and even with a job, this bike was well beyond his means. I didn't want to ruin this moment for him, so I remained positive, congratulated him on his purchase, praised the motorbike, asked him a few follow-up questions, like where was he going to go with it first, etc., and ended the conversation. I needed to talk to James. James informs me that Kevin doesn't own that bike. James let him borrow it, and the bike was a gift to James from his parents. Kevin seemed to think borrowing meant ownership, and so James very kindly agreed that if Kevin paid a small portion of the bike's insurance and replaces the gas he uses, he could, with advanced permission, use the bike. James used this bike to commute to work and couldn't just have Kevin taking off with it. James seemed satisfied that Kevin understood. James's faith in his friend is admirable. But if the question to anything is, does Kevin understand, the answer is almost certainly no. To really explain what Kevin is like, I'm gonna list off a few things. Kevin didn't really know anything about Cuba, or why his grandparents fled. When Fidel Castro died in 2016, he seemed very sad. I tried to inform him about why maybe he shouldn't be, but he didn't really grasp what I was telling him. A few days later, he comes back to me saying derogatory things about Castro, and now tries to explain to me the most butchered version of events of Cuban history I have ever heard. I pretended to be ignorant and congratulated him on his knowledge. He seemed pleased. Kevin once again got his account hacked. He gave his password to someone who promised to do something he was incapable of on his account. He seemed really sad. 3 weeks later, after being given stuff to rebuild by myself and others, he gave his password to another person for the same reason. I agreed that in the future I'd log in and do what he needed for free as long as he stopped giving his password out. He seemed okay with this. I had access to his account for 6 months, and he kept his word. Kevin didn't really understand the game. Most conversations with him involved extensive hand-holding. His peers in the same game quite immensely disliked him for this reason. Kevin would forget things he was taught with some regularity. I tried my best to be patient, but that has its limits. Kevin lacked basic knowledge. He knew nothing about either world wars, didn't know who Napoleon was, didn't know Europe wasn't a country, and believed China and Japan were the same place. We had a mutual friend in the military. Kevin secretly believed this meant our friend committed a crime and joined to avoid prison. When our mutual friend discovered this some months later, he informed Kevin that he joined because he couldn't afford college and wanted an education. Kevin didn't believe him and told him, "You could have got your GED in prison." Kevin strongly supported Trump until I showed him a video of what Trump was saying about Latinos. I asked him what policies he liked from Trump, to have had his support originally, and he responded by telling me that he didn't know what a policy was. We had friends from Hawaii. Kevin refused to believe Hawaii was a state in the US. He thought it was a country. We gave up trying to convince him. He had an online girlfriend. She was 15. He didn't believe me when I said that was illegal. He said he was going to meet up with her. I told him that's probably not a good idea. I hope this provides some context as to the individual we're dealing with here, but here's some more. Kevin liked weed. Kevin liked weed a lot. In 2016, Hurricane Matthew touches down in Florida. I'm in the UK, but it's all over the BBC News. So I ask Kevin if he's okay over Facebook Messenger. 2 seconds later, I get a call. Initially, I don't really see what's happening. You know that scene from Jackass 3 where Ryan Dunn is sitting in a chair behind a jet engine whilst people throw shit into him? That's precisely the scenario I'm confronted with. It's him on his balcony and patio, trying his best to keep a joint in his hand as wind and rain lashes against his face. He can barely talk. But I ask him what he's doing on his balcony, and just barely make out the words, "My mom won't let me smoke inside." After a few minutes, and him finally realizing that we wouldn't be able to have a conversation this way, he goes inside. He's absolutely drenched from head to toe. He wanted advice on how he could smoke weed in such strong winds. He seemed very perturbed when I told him he was under mandatory evacuation and that his ideas to create a makeshift tent to smoke in wouldn't prove fruitful. I told him to leave, as ordered, and he refused. He had to work tomorrow at Dunkin' Donuts, still employed at the time. He was very confused when I said they'd be closed due to the hurricane. He went to work the next day. They were closed. Back to our story. A few months after the hurricane, I receive another call from Kevin, but it's just voice this time. I hadn't spoken to him in about a week and had wondered where he was. Again, it's difficult to make out what's happening initially, but it's not wind that's the issue this time. Kevin is bawling his eyes out, he's sobbing profusely. So I try to calm him down and get some sense out of him. The first thing he gets out once he's calm enough to talk is an admission that bike wasn't technically his, but instead a gift from James, who technically still owned it. I told him I knew this already and asked him why this was relevant. Turns out Kevin and James had fallen out slightly of late and were no longer on speaking terms. Because they weren't talking, Kevin decides to take the motorbike he co-owned with James without telling him. Because Kevin had agreed not to do this, when James discovers his bike missing, he doesn't presume that Kevin took it, but instead that it had been stolen, so James calls the cops and reports the theft. Kevin was also no longer on speaking terms with his weed dealer, and so for the past 2 weeks he'd been buying from someone else. One day, Kevin bought from this person. He was almost immediately stopped and searched. They just let him go with a warning. He buys from this same dealer again the very next day, and for the second time he's stopped and searched. Again, he's let off with a warning and not formally charged. I asked him why he kept buying from a guy who was clearly some sort of snitch, or had police surveillance on him, and his only response was, "Because he's cheap, bro." The reason the cops didn't charge him was that they were waiting to catch someone buying a felony quantity. This is the story I was given and puzzled together. Whether or not this is 100% accurate, I do not know. In his infinite wisdom, Kevin decides to take his motorbike to buy some weed from his dealer. He decided that he can't be bothered driving this far out to buy weed, so he was going to stock up. What he purchases is well beyond a felony quantity. The cops have their man, and his name is Kevin. Like clockwork, lights and sirens. Kevin is presented with 2 options. 1, pull over to the side of the road and accept his fate. 2, lead the police on a 30-minute high-speed chase on a stolen motorbike, whilst in possession of felony quantities of an illicit substance. Kevin picks option 2. He told me he stopped when he realized he wasn't going to just shake them. He seemed upset when I laughed at this, and I asked him if he thought real-life police chases were like Grand Theft Auto games, and he could evade them by losing stars. Kevin said he hadn't really given it much thought. I suspect this is true for most things. Because of this stunt, and presumably a long line of other existing antics, Kevin's mother kicked him out. He's staying with James, who, despite being very upset with Kevin, didn't seem to want to have his best friend be homeless. Kevin lets me know that the cops asked him a whole bunch of questions about his dealer, but he said he didn't tell them much because he didn't know the answers. If this was the culmination of a weeks-long police sting, the cops must have angered a wizard and got cursed. as I can truly imagine no individual less helpful in conveying detail than Kevin. The sheer misfortune of picking him up as a potential snitch still amuses me to this day. I cannot be certain what happens next is entirely accurate, because Kevin is not a reliable source of information. I'm told by Kevin in the preceding days that he needs help getting off 2 felony charges, and thinks I, who understand such magic as basic English and geography, can be of great assistance in this area. I ask him if he was read his rights, and he says he doesn't know, so I read them roughly to him from memory. He says that he was. I asked him if he understood the part about being entitled to free legal assistance, and he says he does. As best as I can understand, Kevin says that they wanted $20 off him for some sort of administrative fee or charge for said legal assistance, and he thinks they're trying to scam him. I tell him to pay his $20 and get professional legal help, but he refuses. I offer to pay the $20, but he again refuses, because he's dim and now effectively representing himself in court. I offer to provide him with as much advice as I'm capable of. He takes this as a cue that I'm now his lawyer. Not long after another voice call on Facebook Messenger, it wakes me up, but I answer anyway. Like seemingly every call I have with Kevin, I don't understand what's going on initially. Just lots of background chatter and shuffling. I call his name but get no response, so I consult the text chat to see if context has been provided. And sure enough, context. Kevin is currently in court. He's being asked to enter a plea, has refused a lawyer, and is calling me because he thinks I'm basically his lawyer and would like me present. By the time I am caught up and have the context, he's being called forward by name and the judge starts to talk to him. When he's asked to speak, he says the words that will stick with me for the rest of my life.
I don't care what you do, homie. I ain't gonna stop smoking weed.
A prolonged silence follows, then laughter. The judge says,
Mr. Kevin, sit back down.
I don't remember if he went to jail or went to actual prison, but I remember that his punishment was unusually lenient. His time in the clink didn't go very well. For the second time, I had to calm him down and stop him from crying upon his return. The best way I can describe his experience as conveyed to me is prison bitch light. His sheer idiocy made him get away extremely lightly, from 2 felony counts reduced down to 1 Class A misdemeanor of resisting arrest. I can only imagine that the judge realized Kevin was operating under diminished capacity, let's say. I asked him why he said that to the judge, and he said,
Just being honest, I ain't gonna stop smoking weed, bro.
Fair enough, Kevin. Fair enough. 2. Okay, in my youth I was pretty good friends with a Kevin. First a little setup to the story. I was a teenager of divorced parents, and like a Christmas story, I got a BB gun as a gift one year from my father. After a few months of only being able to play with it every other weekend, I snuck it to my home with Ma, but she hates guns, so I kept it at my best friend's house, who conveniently was also my neighbor. I kept it in the breezeway to the basement, so the rain wouldn't get to it and I could grab it easily and take it to the woods near my house. So Kevin learned that I had a BB gun, and along with a few other friends would go down to the woods to shoot at targets. Kevin thought it'd be funny to shoot at some of the people that joined us. He even tried to shoot me, but after a threat of a beatdown, he stopped. So one day I went to go shopping and found that the gun was missing. Upset, I went to the woods following the sound of the gun, only to see Kevin shooting at a can. I said you need to ask before taking the BB gun, and took it away from him. Shot a few targets and went to leave. Kevin asked if he could use the gun some more. In hindsight, my mistake. I said, sure, you know where it goes. I'm going to Dad's this weekend, and we can come shooting again then. Well, I get back Sunday and go to grab it again. It's missing. I thought, oh, he's already down there. Nope. So I went home and waited till I saw him the next day at school. This was before cell phones. I asked him where the gun was. He says to me, don't worry, I stashed it in the woods. Well, at the time I didn't worry too much because there were a lot of spots to stash it down there. It used to be an old dump, so surely he had picked a good dry spot. So things happen, and it was a few days before I could get back down to the woods. So Kevin and I talked at school and set up a time after school so we could go shooting. I still didn't know where he was keeping it. As we entered our target area, I was shocked to see him reaching inside a bush to grab it from the barrel. It had been raining the night before, so a waterlogged BB gun was now in his hand. But I was delusional in thinking it would be okay. Unfortunately, the rain had ruined the BB gun, giving it a hair trigger and having it jam every few shots. I told Kevin he owed me a new BB gun. We both laughed, for different reasons at the same time. Him because he didn't think he had to, me because I knew he couldn't. Well, after a few more days, the gun seemed to tap out. Having jammed again, Kevin was trying to unjam the gun. While he was doing that, I was scavenging for a new target. Out of the corner of my eye, I see him trying to look down the barrel of the gun. I remember thinking, surely it's safe. He wouldn't be looking down the barrel of a charged gun with the trigger lock off, right? And well, pop. Luckily for Kevin, he missed his eye. He did, however, shoot himself right between his eyes where the eyebrows connect. He now had a BB embedded in his skin and had to go to the hospital to get it removed. He got 2 stitches and ended up with, you wouldn't see it if you didn't know it was there, X-shaped scar right between his eyes. I still laugh to this day. It was a great life lesson, because I was upset and was going to pursue justice. However, I decided to let karma take care of it. Now you can say what you will about karma, but there are times when if you just trust her, she'll let you watch. 3. I have a lot of free time at my job now, so I'm bored, and remembered a great story about a Kevin I served with years ago in the army. For a plethora of reasons, I'm going to spare as many details as I can. First of all, I was a bit of an idiot too. But I can get to that later because this story is better than anything I ever did. So, Kevin was probably my closest buddy when I was at Fort Bragg. The guy was a brilliant mechanic, we both worked on the same helicopter. He taught me a lot and I miss him. But sometimes the elevator didn't go all the way to the top, if you know what I mean. So one Monday morning the platoon is lined up in formation for a PT. And I notice Kevin is not there. The squad leader asks where he is. I told him I hadn't seen him. Long story short, we go to his barracks room to see if he's there. We knock, no answer. We get the CQ and CO to open the door, hoping he's alive, but he isn't there. Another guy gets a hold of his roommate, and roommate hasn't seen him either. That process took 1.5 hours. We're heading back to the hangar when we get a call from someone in a different company. He has Kevin and he's heading to the hangar. So when we finally see Kevin, he's wearing full winter PTs, which is odd, because it wasn't cold enough to wear them, and instead of running sneakers, he's wearing these slip-on loafers. Turns out, according to Kevin, the night before he decided to take his truck out to the woods and do some off-roading. Nothing out of character for him. I've gone with him a few times before. But I guess since it rained, his truck got stuck on a vertical hill in the North Carolina Bay. When he got out of the truck, he dropped his phone, which slid to the bottom of this hill, and he went down after it and crushed it accidentally. His truck was stuck and no cell phone. He walked out of the woods and was able to hail a cab. He spent his last $18 on a $30 cab ride and got to the barracks in the early hours of Monday morning, about 2 a.m.-ish. It was so early he didn't want to go to sleep for fear of missing formation and didn't want to wait for any of the dozen or so guys who would have gladly driven him because he didn't want to fall asleep. And since he had no money for a cab, he decided just to walk the 10 or so miles to the hangar, where we do morning formation and where we work. But instead of following the streets, he tries taking shortcuts through a military installation. If you've never had the pleasure of walking through a military installation, just know that there are a bunch of areas that are off limits or have restricted access. Fences surrounding large areas that you can't climb over. so I can only imagine how many times he'd walk in one direction, only to have to turn around and go back the way he came, or follow the fence line only to have to turn around and go back the way he came. Four, I work in digital marketing, mostly with small service industry businesses, think contractors, tree trimmers, landscaping roofers, etc. So I definitely get a handful of redneck clients. However, Kevin was a special one. Here's some of my favorite stories from the short time we worked together. While filming drone footage for him, a cable on his lift got caught on a tree and was disconnected. He dangled 40 feet in the air by one arm to try and jam it back in. Neither of us had cell signal. During our first monthly meeting, I traveled down to Kevin's property. He lived in a small shack no bigger than the office room I'm sitting on now. We sat down and I pulled out the report going over web stats and changes. He proceeded to say, "Fuck that," threw the report in his fireplace, which I imagine was the only source of heat, and took me on a 2-hour tour of his property on the back of his ATV. Kevin had great success with Google Ads, but decided to turn them off for the winter. We saw an immediate drop in calls. He did not understand why this was happening. Kevin is an avid user of social media, but not a good one. Despite setting up a business profile and showing him how to switch between them, he seems to switch intermittently between them when posting. Kevin admittedly refused to have a form on his website. It was a deal breaker. We offered solutions such as having the form fills go to our email and sending him the information. And he said, "Anyone who fills out a form is a pussy, and I don't want to work for pussies." Kevin said he wanted to move into the future and start using email and spreadsheets. I suppose he changed his mind on the form fills. We went to Walmart where I helped him pick out a laptop. In the parking lot, must have seemed like the right moment to offer me a joint and tell me about his experience with the Mexican cartel. He killed 50 people with a machine gun. All of this is verifiably false. Kevin was also in the military. Don't try and look tough. He's assured me there's no record of it. Kevin likes using the hard R. Kevin had a bad habit of occasionally picking up his business phone drunk. Kevin seemed genuinely shocked to learn that I had other clients. He was referred to us by another client. When canceling his products and packages, Kevin said that he had found someone else. This person is going to build a website with AI for a one-time fee of $600. Just last week, Kevin posted a meme on Facebook. The caption was "When the client wants it done cheaper," with an image of 2 different drawings of a cat, one with detail and one that was a basic sketch. Our CEO was visiting the office about a month ago when Kevin made a rare appearance. When he left the room to attend to other business, Kevin went on a short rant about how he thinks he was a narc. Kevin grows a singular marijuana plant on his property and is incredibly paranoid about it. It's completely legal here. 5. For context, about an hour ago, I was at the gym. During my workout, I started to get a migraine, and after ending my workout somewhat early, I texted my mom to pick me up. She texted back, telling me that my dad was on his way, so I waited a few minutes until he got there. After asking me how I was and telling him about my migraine, he asked if it was okay if we stopped at the market on the other side of the block, as he wanted to buy something. The migraine wasn't going to kill me, so I was fine with it. We get there and go into the parking lot. Sadly, it seemed like there were no spots left, except for one at the very back. One with a massive black Toyota pulling out. This was Kevin's car. And you could tell it was a Kevin because rather than going in a straight line towards the exit, he barely left the parking space before stopping, reversing, and then turning to the side, almost bumping into another car. This repeats a couple of times as me and my dad stare in confusion. My dad asks, "What is this guy doing?" before honking. Kevin doesn't seem to listen and keeps doing whatever he's doing. Thankfully, my dad's honking caught someone else's attention, and soon after another parking spot was free. My dad parked the car and went inside the market as I tried to relax from my migraine. In a few minutes, my dad comes back with 2 wheels of cheese. He and my mom love cheese. Wondering if Kevin is still doing whatever he was doing earlier. I look to my right and see that he's gone. I guess he finally stopped fucking around, I thought, before my dad groans, "It's this guy again." I turned around and see Kevin's Toyota parked right behind us. Fuck was this guy thinking? Thankfully, my dad drives a very small Volkswagen, small enough to fit between the Toyota and the other parked cars. So, being careful after honking at Kevin again, we managed to get free of the parking space. That's when I got a full look at Kevin. Given his earlier actions, I was expecting some blonde young guy around 18. Where we live, you need to be 18 to get your license. Who, by just looking, you could tell he breathes through his mouth. To my shock, I got something different. Kevin had black hair with what looked to be a very professional haircut, glasses, and a suit. This guy looked like he was in his early to mid-20s and just graduated from college. I don't know if my migraine was messing with my head, but I was just dumbfounded, especially since this guy had a 1,000-yard stare, not really noticing us. Now, I do not want to say. It is possible that Kevin is deaf and just didn't hear my dad's honking. That and his massive Toyota not letting him see us. But it is very weird that he parked his car in the middle of the lot and was just staring forward. Maybe this guy was just dumb, I don't know at this point. Regardless, we made it home, and after greeting my dog who kept nibbling my thighs, I took an ibuprofen and had a nice shower. Hopefully, Kevin got home safely and didn't stop his car in the middle of the street. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to A Cacophony of Kevins, episode 16, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button, and if you'd like early access to these videos, then you can support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. You can head on over there and support me for as little as $1 or more if you'd like a month. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store, and I know I still need to revamp it. I was given a gentle reminder by Jack last night. So we'll be working on that at some point, but I've got so many projects on the go right now. And let's see, I did the merch thing, pimped the Patreon. Oh yes, if you'd like to leave a tip, if you especially enjoyed today's video, you can do that by clicking on the little heart with a $sign in the middle underneath the video. And you don't have to do any of that, but thank you very kindly if you choose to. Okay, no other business, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is a skill you kind of give up on at some point, but in the back of your mind you keep thinking, I'd like to go back, I'd like to knock that out one day, I'd like to, pick that up and master it. For me, it's pretty easy. I started learning to drive quite a few years back, not long after my father passed away. It took a lot of lessons, but a combination of me being quite nervous and an instructor who just wasn't very, very good, ended up dropping it, and I've never went back to it, but in the back of my mind it's always like, I would like to pick it up again one day. And I saw a thing earlier about this new EV vehicle that's out there. It's a 3-wheeler, which isn't usually something I go for, but looks really, really cool. And it's also solar powered. I'm not sure how much use that would be in Scotland. But the idea is it doesn't need as much of a charge as other electric vehicles would. So I thought that looked really, really cool, and that got me thinking, oh man, I really would like to pick that up again. Just that thought circles round in my head fairly frequently. So whenever the cash flows a little more easily, I think that's definitely something I'm going to get back to. It's just practical as well, because I ride my bike right now, and that's probably going to help with overall health. But you'll get to a point when, well, I'll get to a point when I'm an old man, and maybe I don't want to be riding a bike everywhere. Maybe it's more convenient if I just drive. Anyway, that's mine, so why don't you let me know what yours is in a comment below. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And this answer is in relation to what's the most disconnect you found in an older person that they've had with the current prices compared to where they were when they were perhaps a bit younger. I cited myself as an example because I'm always going, oh goodness, that's going up again. That's double the price that it was when I last bought it. and I'll likely keep doing that for some time to come. But we're not highlighting my answer here. We're highlighting someone else's, and that comes from, let's take a look. And this answer comes from A.J. Winberg. I am 46 years old, and I remember when I was about 5 or 6 years old in the early 1980s. My grandfather complained about a cart full of groceries costing $25. If only. And when I say a cart full of groceries, I mean the cart was full. If he was alive today, he would be wishing that he only paid $25 for that cart full of groceries and not $250 or more. It is insane how much it costs just to feed my family of 3. Indeed, I can sympathize with that because, I live alone at present, and the cost of just feeding myself is getting kind of difficult out there, isn't it? Even when you cut back on luxury staples like milk, eggs, bread, eggs, goodness. Whew, okay, I could go on and on about that, but I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for your answer, A.J. Winberg. Okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.